Attic, live on YouTube.
Recording in progress.
And off we go into the wonderful world of live radio. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Yo, what's up, Charles?
What's happening with you? Thanks for joining me.
Just getting a haircut.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, you look good.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. You look great, too.
Nice to see you. What's on your mind today?
Murder.
Uh-oh. Well, don't call for
I'm
any...
just kidding. It's a song. It's a song.
You know, we're
I'm just gonna go.
We're on YouTube here, so we have to be careful.
Oh, we're live with it.
We are live on YouTube, yes, and I take calls and everything. It's kind of a multi-stream sort of a deal. I do it every day at 12 noon. So do you have a TikTok channel?
Like a profile thing?
Yeah, I mean, do you do videos, short videos on TikTok? I mean,
yeah, I used to be on that tough last year. I just kind of mess around on TikTok now though. But yeah, I got a little thing going on.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. You are getting a haircut. All right.
Yeah, no, literally.
Oh, there you are. Okay, cool. Well, listen, have a good one.
What's up?
All right, have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
This is Charles.
All right, take care. All right, so we're off and running here at TikTok. Duvid will be calling in. They're having a power outage in Detroit. So he says that there's something systemic going on there, in that this is, I think, the second or third power outage they've had so far this summer. Anyway, you're welcome to join the program. We are live. And to do so, the number is 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. So Mike Lindell is having his cyber symposium. Today is the third day. It's available at Frank TV. I recommend it. It's amazing what he's doing. A great man. Hello, how are you?
Good.
Nice to see you. What's happening?
Nothing.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. So what's the deal with all the proof that my pillow guy just exposed? Yeah, you tell me, what is the deal with it? It's a sensational program that he is conducting. Now, look, I'm not going to get into the particulars here because this is YouTube and it's a forbidden subject. But let's suffice to say that Mike Lindell and his cyber experts who are there in person and who are coming from around the world are doing what several successive administrations have claimed that they would do, both Democrat and Republican, both the Bushes and Obama and even Trump. And that is to get to the bottom of foreign cyber interference in our elections. That's all they're doing. They're not drawing conclusions here. They're simply noting that the same thing that Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar and all of them have been talking about for years, and doing so publicly in the Senate. And what the media has been talking about, what Lester Holt was talking about when he did a segment on this, what John Podesta was talking about after he did a report on this. And that is cyber hacking into the American elections. Nothing more and nothing less. The government, as is often the case, has failed to do the job of investigating this topic. Now, they are really not investigating it right now for reasons that we will not name because this is YouTube. But I think everyone knows what I'm talking about with regard to the last election. So, Mike Lindell is doing a fantastic job of exposing this. And the only reason why maybe you're not hearing about it out there is because the media has a blackout. They're refusing to cover the story because they fear that it might be somehow deleterious to the present regime. I think that they are letting the chips fall where they do. They're simply looking at the facts. This should not be a partisan issue. We need to know whether or not in this case, Communist China, had infiltrated the last election. People are watching this all over the world because apparently this is going on in countries all over the world in elections going back probably decades even, and that there is a lot of practices associated with electronic voting that indicate that the voting machines very well can be or may be manipulated, possibly by foreign powers. I don't care who manipulates them. The point is, it should never happen. The report that emanated from John Podesta's Democrat group, and he was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager in 2016, involved in the scandal that has to do with a certain kind of food. I'm not going to mention that because I could get banned on YouTube. It's an Italian food, very popular, that is used by the FBI. The FBI says that this type of food is used as a euphemism for pedophilia. I'm not going to get into that because I'll get in trouble. But his report indicated that there was potential for major improprieties with regard to the hacking and the manipulation of online voting machines. So, I mean, I remember, during I think it was the 2012 election, Tom Hartman, ultra left-wing, nationally syndicated radio host, was doing week after week after week of talking about the fact, or his claim, that the voting machines had been hacked by some right-wing group, and that group emanated out of Russia or somewhere else. You don't hear him say anything about it now. I wonder why. The point of the matter is that this, obviously I'm discussing it, I'm mentioning this in an idealized sense, that this should be a subject that ought to concern all Americans, no matter what your political background. You ought to really check out Mike Lindell's presentation. It is brilliant. It is conclusive. It is convincing. And it should result in a full congressional investigation, a complete media investigation, but it won't, because they are circling the wagons around this administration and they don't want to have any expose. Now, I kind of break it down into two media camps. And again, I'm not specifically commenting on the nature of the election here. So YouTube censors, just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean you won't censor me anyway. But they are represented by, on the one hand, Ben Shapiro, who I admire, and I think he's doing a great job. I thought that the other day on Bill Maher, he did a tremendous job of explaining critical race theory in a way that I had not seen it explained, with clarity and with absolute precision. But the question was brought up to me by a liberal friend, the fact that he does not question the outcome of the election. He doesn't question the way the election took place. And my point is to my friend, and I'm going to say it now publicly without questioning anything, is simply that he damn well knows that there were questions about the last election, or he damn well would like to investigate whether or not, let me put it more diplomatically here, whether or not there might have been some issues during the last election. But he won't do that, because if he does do that, he's making millions of dollars through big tech, Google, all the rest of them, Facebook, Twitter, and that there's a very strong likelihood that if he does mention it, that they're going to pull him down. He's making millions of dollars in royalties from his books. There's a likelihood that could be pulled down. He could lose everything. I mean, he's not going to go poor, but he could lose his whole public career. He could simply be airbrushed off the picture the way Stalin used to airbrush his political enemies off of a picture. and that would be because to discuss that issue is forbidden. Now I'm just I'm a low level talk show host here. I don't have the big following that that Ben Shapiro has. They probably aren't paying much attention to me, so it's easy for me to even bring this up. If I were in Ben Shapiro's shoes, I may think otherwise. I don't know. I would tend to hope that I have the scruples to still bring something up, but there's a lot at stake for him, and so he doesn't bring it up. And then, of course, you have the other camp in the media, and that is what I would compare it to here in Boston, where I am, the Jim Braude camp from Greater Boston. And this includes most of the national liberal figures, and that is that they damn well do know that there were possible, maybe, questions about the last election, possibly, but they are doing everything they can to stop any discussion about it because they don't want those questions to be raised. They want, and if someone does bring them up, they will either be completely blackballed and airbrushed and ignored and blacklisted, like what they're doing right now to Mike Lindell. Or if they're able to somehow break through, they'll be scorned, ridiculed, mocked with sarcasm and with a sneering sense of hatred. How dare you? Are you crazy? And all that kind of crap. So that's what we're looking at right now. And that's the sort of the atmosphere that I'm operating in right now as I do this program. And it's a very strange and difficult one. It's a very difficult time. 617-396-4958. You're welcome to join. Yeah, it is sad. We are all silenced. Thank you. I'm getting comments from TikTok. We are being silenced. It's very concerning. What can we do about that? I mean, is there another way to communicate outside of the censors? There are people who are trying to develop that, and they're doing a pretty good job so far. I will mention Getter, Gettr. I have an account there. It's booming. It's busting out like wildfire. It was created by former Trump aide. What's his name? Roger something. I don't know. Not Roger Stone. What's his name? Doug Miller, I think. Anyway, the point is that it is an alternative to Twitter, and it's doing very well. Gab is out there. Telegram is out there. I'm getting fantastic Telegram tweets every day from the likes of Captain Seth Keshel and Dan Scavino and Sidney Powell and lots of other people. And they send me these messages through Telegram. So you might want to sign on to Telegram if you want to get to the truth uncensored. Then there's, of course, the program of Alex, Jones, forbidden, the first person to be censored. I don't endorse everything he says. I don't endorse everything anyone says. And I think he was wrong about some of his excesses around, his claims of false flags. Fine. The point is that he still has his hand on some very good things and good information, and it's worth checking out to get a broader view of things as they may very well be. How do we move forward with the evidence? Well, I'm going to be very kind of elliptical here. I mean, I'm going to be indirect because we are live on YouTube and point out that right now the evidence is sitting there, but there is a major effort on the part of these same people who are not allowing for questions, the same people who might have been involved in the events that, created what happened on November 3rd. And they are people in power who are preventing and doing everything they can to stop any further investigation and certainly to continue with the media blackout. And I'm particularly talking about in Arizona, the audit, the the board of the Maricopa Board of Supervisors, who have been uncooperative in terms of auditing the Maricopa County vote, which is something that any government should be in favor of, Democrat or Republican. If there's any question, there should be audits, routine forensic audits. They are trying to stop it in every way possible, and right now they are refusing to release the passwords and the routers to the electronic voting machines, even though they've been subpoenaed by the state Senate. They are refusing to release those illegally because the state Senate has the plenary power to issue such subpoenas and to get such information, and that those routers and passwords are the property of the people of Arizona. The Senate has an absolute right to have those. They are refusing to release them. The Senate can take the very drastic step, and I hope they do, of having these people locked up until they release them. They are in contempt of the Arizona State Senate. That's illegal. They can be held until they release that information to the senators and the people whom the senators represent. But until they do, then that audit is not going to be complete. So it's frozen right now until the courts work it out and until they are either forced to release them or not. It does obviously beg the question of what they're hiding, what's in those routers that they're willing to, fall on their swords over. I would suspect there must be something pretty bombastic on those routers. Just would assume it by nature. Otherwise, they would have released them a long time ago. And the same thing is happening in Pennsylvania, where you have State Senator Doug Mastriano issuing subpoenas to three counties, three voting counties, including Philadelphia, for audits. I don't know how that works, but there's resistance there. There's a corrupt government there that has told all counties to not release information to the elected state Senate, which is unlawful because the elected state Senate in all states has the sole and plenary powers to regulate elections and to conduct things like audits. That's their legal obligation. They are fulfilling that obligation as elected representatives who have taken an oath to uphold their respective state constitutions. So the fact that this is happening and you have open illegality on the part of governors and secretaries of states and attorneys generals to obfuscate and to obstruct legitimate investigation is something that is a national problem. It's lawless. They will never give up the routers. Yeah, I mean, because that's probably where the ultimate smoking gun is, I would assume. Why else are they willing to go to such extremes to not give them up? Because the Democrats know the Republicans are not going to arrest anyone? Yeah, probably. The Republicans need some spine. These people should all be they should be held in contempt. It's just that simple until they release the routers. Release the routers. 617-396-4958. What is on your mind? I'm expecting a call soon from Duvid. He's a regular guest of mine on Thursday. He's in Detroit and they're having a power outage, so he's not going to come on the program through Zoom. I gave him the phone number. Hopefully he'll call. 617-396-4958. It says, that the U.S. Constitution and federal law overrides the state. Yeah, you're right. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, says in black and white that the state legislators have the sole authority to regulate elections. So they're not overriding the U.S. Constitution. They're upholding the U.S. Constitution. That is what the U.S. Constitution says. The U.S. Constitution specifically gives that responsibility to the states' legislatures, or recognizes their right, because that's really where the power resides. When elections every 2 years, including the presidency, which is every 4 years, and the Senate, which is every 6 years, but still on a bi-yearly cycle, are run by the states. They are 50 elections for the presidency. There are 50 separate elections, and those elections are regulated by the state legislature, unless the state legislature does something that contradicts the federal constitution. And there is nothing in the constitution, there's nothing that would prevent them from calling for full forensic audits. That's perfectly normal, actually. And it's always been done. I mean, this is just conventional that if the state wants that because they believe that there is enough questions around an election, they have the legal authority to have that and the lawful authority to have it. So that is the U.S. Constitution. Read it. Representative Bailey Brower is right. Ask of the covenant is under Stonehenge. I don't know what that means. Adding that all other stuff to your answer doesn't make you sound smarter. I don't know if I sound smart or not. I'm just looking at the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Article 2 says that the state legislators have the plenary authority to regulate elections. Maybe you might want to read it, and maybe it might make you a little smarter, okay? Shockingly, our votes are being stepped on. It proves that our votes never counted in the first place. Well, what is my opinion on gerrymandering? Gerrymandering goes all the way back in my own home state of Massachusetts it's named after Governor Elbridge Gerry. He was a Federalist, and he created a district that looks like a serpent in order to preserve the power of the Federalists. It's how it's been done since the 1790s. There's nothing new. The party that has the majority rule in a state house has the ability to gerrymander districts in a way that benefits them. There are problems with that. I mean, certainly in Massachusetts, they've been doing it forever. If they see a strong center for Republicans, they'll split it up into 2 or 3 pieces so as to dilute it, and they'll attach those to a majority liberal Democratic area. And they've been able to prevent, with a couple of rare people slipping through the cracks, any Republican from holding office in the U.S. House or Senate. I mean, Scott Brown was an exception, but for the most part, at least on the House level, the gerrymandered districts, so Senate is a state election, but on the House level, there's been very few Republicans since the 1960s and 1970s when the Democratic Party really took over the state. So, I know Democrats are complaining about Republican states doing this. I think that they're actually a little late to the game. It's been done for a long time. And, I don't know what the solution is to that. I mean, some people say that there needs to be a bipartisan commission that draws borders for the districts. Maybe. I don't know. That's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be researched. Let's see. I think it's time to spill the tea, folks. What do I think about the Cyber Symposium? Brilliant. The opening film should be viewed by every American. It's fantastic. And the thing I liked about it, if I may say, is that they quote all these liberal Democrats calling for, making claims about the machines and calling for reforms and calling for a return to paper ballots as a way to avoid, this sort of problem. Okay, do we have a call? No. All right, so you're welcome to join the conversation again. Charles Moscowitz live Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1, around 617-396-4958. What is on your mind this afternoon? 617-396-4958. I'm getting some kind of beeping noise here. We have heard ad nauseum. And we'll probably never hear the end of these claims that the incursion into the U.S. Capitol on January 6th was a, quote, insurrection, unquote. and that the people involved in it were trying to overthrow the government, that they were, in a way, terrorists, has been compared to the biggest event since the War of 1812, the biggest event since Jesus mounted the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, if you listen to the left. And, I think that in the real sense, it was an insurrection. Yes, they're right. It was an insurrection on that day. Let's examine how it did, in the real sense, overthrow our government and what the consequences of that have been. It prevented the joint session of the U.S. House and Senate from hearing from 7 states that were contesting their delegations to the presidential electoral college. Now, on that date, the states gather, the state representatives and senators gather, both parties, in the chamber to elect the President of the United States. It happens every 4 years on January 6th. It's in the Constitution. And every 4 years at that event, according to the Constitution, the states have the opportunity to contest the delegation that is being seated. If there are people in that state that want to elect an alternative body of delegates, then they have to request of the president of the proceedings, and in this case, that president was the vice president and always is, that being Mike Pence, in writing, with one senator and one representative jointly signing a document, handing it to the president, requesting that that state have a hearing and present evidence as to why that particular delegation should not be seated. That is our constitutional form of government. This has happened not every election, but it's happened often. What is a number I can put in the chat? Is it for a Zoom link? Yeah, I'm on Zoom at YouTube. I'm live at YouTube, and I'm live at about 8 other venues. But check out YouTube if you want to see the show live. And if, please subscribe to me on YouTube, by the way. I'd really appreciate that. That's how our Constitution works, anyway. At this session, there is the opportunity for the respective states to examine their vote and question their delegations with the request by, again, a sitting member of the House and a sitting senator. And once that process is triggered, the state has up to 2 hours to present their evidence. And at the end of that 2 hours, the president of the Senate has the extraordinary plenary power, in other words, the sole power, to decide which delegation will be seated, or if any delegation will be seated. That's an incredible power. It's been done going back to Jefferson, who, as the president of the proceedings, ironically, ended up choosing delegates that had voted for him as president, in a way quite corruptly, but not really. He probably made his point. If the delegations were switched from Biden to Trump, then that could have led to a Trump victory. Or more likely, if they simply were not counted because they were inconclusive, then that could have led to neither candidate having enough delegates to become president, at which case the election would go to a session of the House. Now, this wouldn't be an ordinary session of the House with Nancy Pelosi. This would be a session of the House where each state chooses one delegate to that session, and they take a flat up and down vote. And whichever candidate has the most votes becomes president of the United States. It's been done. It was done in 1824 for John Quincy Adams. It was done in 1876 for Rutherford B. Hayes. This isn't unprecedented. This is how our Constitution works. This is called democracy, if I may say. This is our Republican form of government. And by the way, if it had come to that, probably Trump would have been president because the delegate is chosen according to the Constitution by the state legislature, and 31 state legislators, I think 32, are Republican-controlled legislators, which would mean that they would choose a delegate likely who would vote for the Republicans. So that's how it would have come down, all right? Now, when I say insurrection, which side wanted to stop that process? You had 7 states contesting their election. They were Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. And then those 6 states were joined by a 7th state, New Mexico, which is a state that really, seemed to be in the Biden camp. I mean, it wasn't contested, but apparently the people of New Mexico felt strongly that there had been improprieties in their state, and they wanted the opportunity to present them in public. And that they had the senators and the representatives ready to go. Senator Josh Hawley was one of the leaders in that. On the representative side, you had from Arizona, Mo Brooks was leading that effort. There was something like a dozen House representatives who were signing on. And this was about to happen. This is how our government works. And indeed, the states are called through a roll call by alphabetical order. So the first state to be called, ironically, that was contesting would have been Arizona. Arizona was called. The contestation was launched. The document was signed and handed to the president, Mike Pence. And the 2 hours were beginning. Now, just think about that for a minute. You have 2 full hours where the American people would finally get to see the evidence of whether or not there had been a problem in that state. And it would have been nationally televised. The media couldn't ignore this. And it was being nationally televised. And they started to present their evidence, and it was fantastic. It was sensational. Both sides got to present their arguments. Both sides got to debate each other. There doesn't necessarily have to be a conclusion. There just is the opportunity to bring out all the information that they could on both sides. And at the end of the 2 hours, if they take up to 2 hours, then it's up to the president of the proceeding, again, Mike Pence. Well, the insurrection put a stop to the whole proceeding. That's where you have an insurrection. Because of the people allowed to enter the Capitol, and they do appear to have been allowed, and I think that footage shows that, you had a stop to the proceeding. You had the guy with the fuzzy hat, and the horns, and the painted face, the so-called QAnon shaman, suddenly show up in the chamber. And the result was, and rightfully, that everything was suspended. Now, the question of how it is they got in the Capitol, why maybe they could have had the proceedings in a sealed room somewhere, how it could be that this couple of nutcases would actually get in there in one of the most important events in America with some of the highest level people. That's a very serious question that should be investigated. All right, so we've got... all right, so you're welcome to call in. We just got a call here. 617-396-4958. 617-396-4958. Please call back. Sorry I missed you. I'm waiting for your call. So anyway, that is the insurrection. That was the overthrow of our system. Because the fact of the matter is that the entire proceeding was suspended, and then it was reconvened in the wee hours of the morning, like at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, without any media, without anybody around, no hearings, no contestations. The 7 states were deprived of their constitutional right to have their delegations contested. Instead, you had Mike Pence just gavel through the delegates and Biden declared president of the United States. Now, I'm not here to contest the fact that Biden is the president of the United States, because that's however it happened, that's what happened. And he was inaugurated, he took the oath of office, and he is the president. And Kamala Harris is the vice president of the United States. So for you two people who are trying to censor me, I want to be clear here. I'm not questioning that fact. That is what happened. I'm simply talking about an aspect of that was insurrectionist, that it happened because of these people stopping the constitutional proceedings, which very well may have resulted in a different result. I'm not saying it would have. I'm saying it may have, and we don't know because it never happened. So we never got to hear the evidence. We never got to hear what they had to say, and we probably never will. You have people like Mike Lindell trying to talk about it, fine. We can only do what we can do. But the fact is that there was an insurrection. It's that simple, and that's how I would define it. And that the results of that insurrection have been a more authoritarian type of government. Hello, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Charles, it's David.
Hi, David. How are you? So, David, you've got you join me usually on Thursday, except this week, instead of doing it by Zoom, you're calling in. We often discuss issues relating to Judaism and Israel and America and politics. You tell me that you're having a blackout right now in Detroit. What's going on?
Yeah, big storms. There was a 60-mile-an-hour wind and 2 to 4 inches of rain last night, and it caused one of the biggest blackouts, I guess, in years. I guess they said 2017. There was a big blackout. Also, 3,100 power lines down. They say there's close to 10% of Michigan is out of power, and in Metro Detroit, about 25% of people don't have power. And if you remember, a month ago, I had to cancel because of a power outage. Last week, I canceled because of the Science of Consciousness conference. So maybe it's good to talk about the infrastructure bill, and I've been mentioning incompetence in government, and largely I was mentioning the power outages and the flooding, and Michigan right now, God forbid, I think I'm getting a good exercise. I have been manually draining my sump pump. I had an inch of water. I went to my parents. They have a generator, and there was already an inch of water in my basement, and I just drained manually. I bent down into my sump pump and pulled out 25 buckets of water, and I'll probably have to do that again right after we're done speaking. I'm going to have to buy. I should have had it before, but I wasn't expecting these mass power outages combined with flooding. Although I should have, so I'm going to have to buy some sort of generator so that at least I could run the sump pump. But I assume last time a few weeks ago when this happened, there were tens of thousands of people in Detroit that had flooding, and I think almost a decade ago there was flooding like this, and I know the Jewish community was devastated that tons of people had substantial damage to houses. People had collections of stuff in their basement completely ruined. So I would not be surprised if that's happening right now, and they don't even have an update. The DT, which is somewhat privately run, said it's have crews from 3 different states, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, coming in to help with the damage. But as of now, they don't even have an estimate for when we're going to get power back on. So it could be that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people without power for maybe even a week, God forbid.
David, what's going on in Michigan? I mean, is it old infrastructure that's falling apart? I mean, you've got a background in engineering. You might want to comment on the condition of both Michigan's drainage system and its electrical system. What's going on?
Yeah, I think it's mostly trees. So, I mean, if you remember when Mitt Romney's from Michigan, he had said, Michigan where trees are the right height. But like I mentioned with the Surfside building collapse, most of the suburbs were built about 40, 50 years ago. And, the trees, I had to have a tree cut down in my front yard because it probably would have fallen on me. It cost like $5,000. And, just kind of a nice story that the man, I used this Mexican man that I found through Angie, this web service, and he started as a climber, just a cutter, but now he has his own, big business with like 30 laborers. But he had started, at the bottom as, just someone who climbs the tree. But so the trees that have been planted with the suburbs, were probably poorly planned, and at this point they're growing straight into the wire. So anybody who lives in Michigan, I don't know if it's like that in Boston, and like I mentioned with the, that most of the building in the suburban areas was done about 40, 50 years ago. So the trees are going straight into the wires, and the nature of the business model is that they don't really preventively, there's no budget to preventively, cut the trees before they hit the wires. So they cut them after there's a problem. And it's basically always been that way for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I believe in global warming, whether, the element of man-made, but it could be, I read the whole IPCC. I read a few hundred pages of the IPCC report. It was like 4,000 pages.
Right.
Michigan is an area that is not expected to suffer global warming. Actually, we've had cooler temperatures, but we're expected to have flooding, mass rain, and high winds. So wind speeds of up to 60 miles an hour, plus massive amount of trees that were built probably 40, 50 years ago and now are past their healthy life and are naturally coming down with higher wind speed. It's
right.
Combining for a disaster that we're not really prepared for. There's really not a good answer, besides for the electric company that after these storms cuts it down. But this is, this summer, this is like the fourth time this summer that there's been a power outage, and each time it's been worse. That's taking longer, and
no, I noticed that this is strictly anecdotal, but in my own neighborhood in Boston and in some other Boston neighborhoods, there's been a lot of pruning going on with trees. I see people out there chopping down, excess branches and sort of like shaping the trees in a way that they can withstand weather. But I want to ask you about the Biden infrastructure bill. My understanding is that only about 10% of that is actually going to infrastructure. So I would imagine that that's, it's too bad because I think under Trump, he wanted an infrastructure bill about the same cost, but something like 80 or 85% of it actually went to real infrastructure. But you had Mitch McConnell and the Rhino Republicans refusing to help, whereas now they're happy to help this one, where the money is really mostly going to left-wing organizations and foreign dictators.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You probably saw that Biden called Governor Whitmer Jennifer, and I guess the previous female governor,
Granholm.
Jennifer Granholm. I think she might even be in his administration now. But
she is.
But yeah, I have very little confidence that the infrastructure bill will do much to help us. I mean, it might do a little bit, but yeah, I mean, probably the vast majority of the money will be blown. I studied urban planning at University of Michigan, and urban planning infrastructure is really one of the main things where socialism central planning is beneficial. My mother was mentioning the CARE Acts a few years ago provided huge sums of money to bury broadband near Ann Arbor. But usually it's just patched. So if Metro Detroit or Boston wanted to have some huge infrastructure overhaul, like Flint and the lead pipes, you would have to coordinate all of these various things. If you're going to bury the wire instead of having it overhead, which makes it probably more safe, combined with the broadband and the other wires, and at the same time, you're going to look at the pipes or replace the pipes and the sewage. But they're really all ran by different organizations, and there's not really any entity like I would really doubt the Democrats would be able to pull together. And the interesting factor is, generally all social programs are leftist. Like healthcare, welfare, housing, and almost all engineering, construction fields are on the right. So the companies like Detroit Edison, Con Edison, the construction labor, the unions that sewage or any of the infrastructure are generally on the right. And but they're not really free market. Like at this point,
I understand. They're not. They want to have public service.
They have a monopoly.
Right.
They have a monopoly, and but they have so the government, when they clamp down on them, basically is more about putting more women in charge or affirmative action, hiring practices. That's what they crack down on the,
as opposed to really actually putting people in who can do something. And in a way, there's a corruption in that.
I mean, onto you.
Yeah, and also we might remember
if they did try to do all these things privately, they just have to pass the price on to the customer.
Well, and I'm not against the idea of public utilities. I mean, that goes way back, and but a good example of the corruption in a way of private utilities or quasi-public would be the catastrophe of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, where we find out that each of the levees and each of the canals was controlled by a different agency, and that they were all corrupt and they weren't coordinating with each other, and they all were on the take and everybody was getting money. And if there had been some kind of a central coordination on the local, state, and even federal level, then maybe they could have handled that emergency better. In fact, they would have. But and that seems to me to be the problem.
Hit harder. I mean, it's tragedy of the commons. The people who live in more rural areas are likely have a longer term planning and would think about these things before it's too late. Like, the basement, do you need a sump pump? Do you need to spend, an extra $10,000 in your house? And if, or have your tree cut down. And if you're only going to live there a few years, it doesn't really add value to your house. It cost me almost $5,000 to have this huge tree in my front yard cut down. It's going to cost another $4,000 to have the maple in my backyard cut down. It's not going to add any value to my house. So if you could sell it and pass it on to the next user and, them not notice and try to take money off the price, it's basic tragedy of the commons. So even in Michigan, the majority of the power outage and the flood damage is in the urban Democratic areas, and the people who are, they need to call in and fix it are basically Republicans. So, I was mentioning my mother, she had to have trees cut, and she didn't really like them that much. And I said, because they're Trump Republicans. And I told her, basically all tree cutting services are Trump Republicans. I don't think. So,
the point is, cutting a tree is cutting.
Guys that were speaking Spanish when they cut down my tree are Trump Republicans.
Look, cutting a tree is cutting a tree is cutting a tree. Anyway, David, the other thing, of course, with this phony infrastructure bill is there's some really weird and troubling things salted into it. One of the things is that every American car is going to have spyware in it, where the government can look at it, listen to you and watch you and decide whether or not they're going to allow you to turn the car on. That's gets into political questions. It also legalizes men participating in women's sports. It forcibly integrates the girls' locker room, the girls' shower room, the girls' bathroom on a federal level. So, there are all sorts of weird stuff. It becomes a hate crime to criticize the CDC. Hate crimes is not something that we should ever have in this country. They're political crimes. We're not supposed to have that here. We're supposed to have criminal crimes, not political crimes. So, it really is very troubling in terms of ending what we conventionally think of as individual rights and human rights in this country. And it's ugly, and they're sneaking it in. It's horrifying. I just hope that the one silver lining, hopefully, is that you've got the extreme communists like AOC and your good friend Rashida Tlaib saying that they're not going to vote for the bill because it's not $10 trillion. They want to have the whole thing. So maybe because of that, they might stop it. Anyway, David, I'm going to have to run because I want to keep the show up to an hour. What are you working on now? I know that you're having a blackout. Do you have anything coming up?
Well, hopefully, they'll get on in the next few days. Last week, the Science of Consciousness conference was interesting, and just to mention quickly, they closed the chat and saying they didn't owe me anything. It was a free conference. They could run it any way they want. They have their sponsors. Actually, one of them was the Simon Foundation, the MIT mathematician who created those algorithms for the hedge fund, but they really don't like people talking to each other, and it's really irritating.
Who closed the chat?
It's supposed to be the runners of the conference. There was a Zoom call, and the first day there was a little bit of trolling or whatever.
Sure.
And then the next 3 days of the conference, they just closed the chat. And I know at like university and other settings, a lot of times because the donor, even synagogues, like they don't like people talking to each other because they want to control the narrative. And they want to control, the donors. So if people start talking to each other, the donors might see that, that maybe they should give their money someplace else, or controlling the narrative, where they think, oh, I'm so competent. But if they allow an open chat, maybe they're going to see other people understand this better. So it's the simplest method, just no talking to each other.
Well, and, it's part of this. We all
the infrastructure bill. Is they don't want these parties coordinating, because
we're all accepting the idea of censorship now as a matter of routine, and we are in a censorious time. I mean, if YouTube can take down Rand Paul recently and remove him, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and of course they removed President Trump, we're living. This is like, we like to think we're such a free country. We like to sneer at and wave our finger at communist China and at Putin. Well, guess what? We are we're closer to them than we may think, maybe even more so in many ways. Anyway, David, listen, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you next week. Be well.
If you comment later, I'll listen back. The unfortunate, Rashida Tlaib you mentioned, in the red areas. What are we going to do after sitting without power in a week? Are they still going to be worried
it's a disaster.
about pushing all this other stuff a week later when we still have no power? So I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me call in, and hopefully, next week I'll have better things to mention.
I hope so. I'm sorry about the power. It's a disaster. Thanks a lot, David.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of wraps things up for today. I just want to finish briefly my comment about the insurrection. So the results of that have been a more authoritarian government where we have formalized censorship, as we just mentioned. We can have people removed if their opinion is not appreciated by the regime, that protects itself first and that increases its power. We have upwards of 400 or 500 people being detained in prison without facing charges, without access to their lawyers, without due process, in some cases apparently in solitary confinement. There's a report of one of these prisoners having been beaten and losing eyesight as a result, them being tortured. So we're here very smug about looking at Putin and at communist China. It makes it a little difficult given the present regime. And it does raise the question of whether or not this regime really was the result of an insurrection. I have defined insurrection here. I'm not claiming it's an opinion. I'm hoping I'm not taken down for it, but there it is. Anyway, I shall return tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The show is self-sponsored, so I want to just mention that my books are available. I sponsor myself through my own books. They are available at Amazon Books. My most recent book is The Satanic Conspiracy. Let me just hold it up for the camera. There it is. It's available at Amazon Books. Charles Moscowitz. I'm very proud of this one. The Satanic Conspiracy, The Spectre Haunting Mankind. This book is selling pretty well, too, compared to my other books. Let me just hold it up for YouTube. There it is. Charles Moscowitz, Satanic Conspiracy, available at Amazon Books. And on that note, I want to thank you all for joining me this afternoon. God bless you all. God bless our great country. God bless America. Check out and don't forget to watch Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium on Frank TV. It's incredible. And God willing, I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.